In the signature course, Past a Day, Why Conflicts Endure, a comparative literature course, we will explore conflict across disciplines and across cultures. We will be looking at the way division is represented in 3 different units. A unit on the division of the Korean Peninsula, a unit on the division of Argentina into the capital and El Campo, which is the countryside, and then the conflict between American Empire and radical Islam. So the signature course Past a Day is multidisciplinary in basically 2 ways. One is in a sort of old-fashioned comparatist way. We're looking at 3 distinct regions with 2 ways of approaching the world that are very different. And this also involves linguistic competence. That's one way in which it's interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary. In Argentina, about 4 years ago, there was a huge conflict between the city of Buenos Aires, which is enormous. It's the size of New York. 12 million people live there. And the rest of the country, where about 25 million people live, maybe 30 million people live. And the president, Cristina de Kirchner, her government had levied an export tax on certain agricultural goods because that was a way of raising money in order to support the welfare and working class in Buenos Aires. If you open virtually any work of literature from the 19th or early 20th century, there's some sort of reference to the politicians who wanted to focus power on the capital in Buenos Aires and those who wanted to have a more diffuse establishment of power in the rest of the country so that the different regions would be equal. There's this constant back and forth between these 2 strains in Argentine political thought and political practice. Being divided is sort of built into the software of Korean culture. Korea finds itself between China and Japan. It's always found itself between China and Japan throughout its history. And sometimes they've been more influenced by China, sometimes more influenced by Japan, sometimes influenced by China through Japan. And then at the end of World War II, they find themselves divided between the Soviet Union and the United States. One of my arguments is that being divided is sort of built into the software of Korean culture, and that one of the ways to get around the historical predicament of Korea divided is to try to find a way around that kind of thinking, around the thinking of division. The other way in which Past a Day is multidisciplinary is that we don't just stick to reading books. We're also going to look at visual arts, film, architecture, TV shows. We're going to listen to music. And though each of these fields makes its own sorts of demands on the reader, the spectator, they can all be read. Our job is to look at them, figure out where they come from, figure out what they mean, but I think more importantly, figure out how they mean. One of the things we'll be focusing on is the construction of monuments. The Buddhist statues of Bamayan that were destroyed by the Taliban in Afghanistan before the war in Afghanistan drove them out. The construction of the memorial at the site of the Twin Towers in lower New York. The way in which people are remembered in some of the films that have been made about the attacks on 9/11. We're going to look at all of these things and talk about what goes into, what are the motivations behind remembering in this way, but also trying to imagine ways of remembering that might get us beyond conflict. So the final project that I'm going to ask the students to do is, over the course of the semester, we're going to make a list of monuments in New Jersey. By the end of the semester, I'm going to ask each of the students to have picked a particular monument in New Jersey. Research its history. They're to put the monument into the context of the moment when it was first constructed, and then to look at what it means now, to see if there's some sort of evolution, to see if what was being commemorated holds the same meaning today. What we'll discover is that some conflicts have been forgotten. What we'll discover is that some conflicts, our ideas about what they are, have changed a great deal. And we'll discover that some are still fraught with controversy today. So once they finish this final project, they'll understand something about the way in which conflict was represented here in New Jersey. When they walk away from the course at the end of the semester, I want the students not only to have learned about conflict in Korea, conflict in Argentina, conflict between American Empire and radical Islam, but more than that, I want them to be able to approach it in such a way that it doesn't diminish their enjoyment, their aesthetic appreciation of it, but it allows them to analyze what it means to remember something in such a way, to commemorate something in such a way, that when we remember, when we commemorate, when we memorialize, it's not innocent, that there's always something going on, and using the works we're reading, the films we're looking at, the architecture we'll be talking about, we can get rid of our misperceptions and appreciate other cultures for the complex things that they are.